The first sign that William isn't answering. Charles is with the Prime Minister. George's stomach twisted. So no one knew. No one except Camilla. George, did they give you a reason? He shook his head. Charlotte piped up, trembling. They said it was a last-minute change. That the seating had to be adjusted. Catherine's laugh was short and sharp. Of course. The seating. Because that's always the excuse. The car ride to the palace was silent. George stared out the window as London blurred past. Charlotte fidgeted with her dress. Catherine sat perfectly still. The only sounds were the engine's hum and the police escort's radio crackling. The palace loomed ahead, windows glowing gold in twilight. As they pulled up, George saw guests arriving. Diplomats in evening dress, officers in full regalia. His stomach dropped. They were already inside. The banquet had begun, and he wasn't on the list. Catherine stepped out, heels clicking sharply. George and Charlotte hurried to keep up. The moment they entered the grand hallway, the air hit them like a wall, warm, thick with flowers and murmured conversation. A footman started toward them, confused. "Your Highness, the Princess of Wales. Where is the Queen Consort?" Catherine's voice cut through the noise like a whip. The footman faltered. "In the receiving line, Your Highness." But nothing. George's pulse pounded. Through the crowd, he saw his grandfather's profile turned toward ambassadors. His father wasn't there yet. Neither was Camilla. But the empty space beside the king's chair was impossible to miss. "That's where I was supposed to sit." Catherine's hand found his shoulder, grip firm. "Stay here." She strode forward, posture regal, chin lifted. Guests nearest the door noticed first. A ripple of silence spread as they recognized her, conversations dying mid-sentence. By the time she reached the banquet hall entrance, the room had gone quiet enough that the scrape of her shoes against marble sounded like a gunshot. Camilla was across the room, back to the door, laughing at something the French ambassador said. She didn't turn at first, but the silence registered. Her shoulders tensed. She slowly turned, smile fading as she saw Catherine in the doorway. The two women locked eyes. The air between them crackled. Catherine didn't speak. She didn't have to. She walked forward, path a straight line toward the head table. Guests parted like the Red Sea, eyes wide, spoons hovering halfway to mouths. George felt his breath catch. His mother looked like a queen. No, she looked like a general. Camilla finally moved, stepping away from the ambassador with a murmur of apology. She met Catherine halfway, posture rigid, voice low but carrying. "Catherine, this is not the time." Catherine didn't stop walking. She stopped 2 feet from Camilla. "Where is my son?" Camilla's eyes flicked toward the door. There was a change in the seating arrangements. "A change," Catherine repeated, voice dangerously soft. "By whose authority?" "Mine." Catherine's laugh was a single, sharp sound. "Of course, because the king was too busy being king to notice, and my husband was too busy being heir to care. So you decided which of my children are worthy of their birthright." Camilla's face flushed. "This is not about worth. This is about protocol. A royal banquet is a state occasion. Hierarchy must be respected. And where does my son fall in this hierarchy, Camilla?" Catherine's voice had an edge now. "Below his brother? Below his cousins? Or below you?" The last word hung heavy as a crown. Camilla's eyes flashed. "You dare." "I dare," Catherine cut in. "I dare everything for my children. And if that means calling out the hypocrisy of a woman who spent 20 years fighting to be accepted into this family, only to turn around and exclude the next generation, then yes, I dare." A gasp rippled through guests. Camilla's face went pale. For a moment, George thought she might strike Catherine. But then her expression shuddered, voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You have no idea what I've sacrificed for this family. And you have no idea what I would sacrifice for mine." Catherine turned her head slightly, gaze locking onto George. She gave the smallest nod. "Come." George didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, head high, hand clutching Charlotte's. The room held its breath. A footman started toward them, but Catherine stopped him with a glance. George reached his chair and paused. The king had turned, expression a mix of confusion and realization. George met his eyes. The old man's face softened before turning to Camilla, voice low but carrying. "Camilla." She didn't answer, eyes fixed on George. George pulled out his chair. The scrape was deafening. He sat. Charlotte sat beside him. Catherine took her place on his other side, hand on his chair's back. "This is where we belong." Camilla's voice trembled. This is unacceptable. Catherine turned to her, smile polite, but eyes cold. Then do something about it. The challenge hung in the air. Camilla's gaze darted to the king, then to the sea of watching faces. She opened her mouth, then closed it. There was nothing she could say. The string quartet struck up a new piece. The king cleared his throat and welcomed guests. The banquet resumed, but the damage was done. George tried to focus on his meal, but his hands shook. Charlotte reached under the table and squeezed his hand. Across the table, Camilla sat ramrod straight, food untouched. Catherine was calm, but George saw her fingers tighten around her glass. When dessert was served, the king leaned toward George, voice low. You did well, boy. Thank you, grandfather. The old man's eyes flicked to Camilla, then back. Your mother has a way of making her point. George just nodded. The king patted his hand, then turned back to his conversation. George let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for hours. The banquet finally ended. George stood, legs wobbly. He'd done it. But as he turned to follow his mother out, he caught Camilla's eye. She was watching him, expression unreadable. Then she turned away, back stiff, and George felt a chill. Catherine gathered them in the hallway, voice low. We're not done yet. What do you mean? She glanced toward the king's private study. We're going to have a conversation. That conversation happened an hour later. George and Charlotte waited in the anteroom with biscuits, ears pressed to the door, hearts pounding. Catherine's voice, low but sharp, without so much as a courtesy to the boy's parents. Williams measured a pattern. Camilla. First Charlotte, now George. Where does it end? Camilla's was hardest to make out, but George caught hierarchy and respect more than once. The king's, weary but firm. Enough. This stops now. Silence. A minute later, the door opened. Catherine stepped out, face unreadable. She gathered them up and led them toward the palace entrance. We're going home. George wanted to ask what happened, but his mother's jaw told him it wasn't the time. As they stepped into the car, he couldn't hold it in anymore. Mama, is everything all right? Catherine hesitated. Then she turned to him, expression softening. She cupped his face. No, but it will be. The next morning, newspapers were buzzing. The Daily Mail. Prince George stands his ground. The night the future king refused to be cast aside. The Times. A question of protocol. Who really runs the royal household? By midday, the palace's press office released a statement about a miscommunication. But the damage was done. Do you think they'll fire someone? Charlotte asked. George shrugged. Maybe. Catherine walked in, phone to her ear. She saw the tablet and sighed, ending the call. She sat across from them, expression serious. Last night wasn't just about the banquet. It was about power, and about who gets to decide what's best for this family. She took a deep breath. Your father and I have decided that from now on, no one, not the queen, not the staff, not even the king, will make decisions about your appearances without our approval. George's eyes widened. Really, she confirmed. And we've made it clear that if anyone tries to go around us, there will be consequences. Charlotte grinned. So Camilla's in trouble? Catherine's smile was small. Let's just say she's been reminded of her place. George felt relief and gratitude. But then his mother's expression sobered. This isn't over. People like Camilla, they don't give up that easily. There will be other tests. George nodded. But for the first time, he understood. He wasn't alone. He had his family, and that was enough. A week later, George was back at school. But the lesson stuck. He stood a little taller. When an older boy at Eton tried to cut in front of him in the lunch line, George didn't back down. He met the boy's gaze, voice steady. I was here first. The boy blinked, then stepped back. George didn't gloat. He took his tray and walked away, heart pounding. It wasn't a big moment, but it was his moment. Power wasn't something you took. It was something you earned. Meanwhile, at Buckingham Palace, Camilla sat in her private study, tea growing cold beside her. Newspapers lay open on her desk. She already knew what they said. Her secretary knocked. Your Majesty, the king has requested your presence in his study. Camilla didn't look up. Tell him I'll be there in a moment. The secretary hesitated. He knows you're here, Your Majesty. Camilla's fingers tightened. Very well. The secretary bowed and withdrew. Camilla stayed, gaze fixed on the wall. Then she stood, smoothed her skirt, and walked toward the door. Steps slow, measured, but her mind raced. She'd lost. Not just the battle, but the war. Walking down the hallway, she passed a window. Her reflection stared back, a woman in her late 70s, hair perfect, dress immaculate. But her eyes betrayed the truth. She was tired. She paused, hand on the windowsill. Outside, palace gardens stretched out, green and perfect, just like the life she'd built. But perfection was fragile. She turned away and continued down the hall. The king's study was at the end. She knocked once, then entered without waiting. Charles was behind his desk, reading glasses on his nose. He looked up as she entered, expression unreadable. The only sound was the grandfather clock ticking. "Camilla, sit." She took the chair across from him, back straight, hands folded. Charles studied her, then set down his pen. "We need to talk about George." Camilla's jaw tightened. "There's nothing to talk about." "And yet," Charles said dryly, "you didn't make it public." "I didn't think it would be an issue." "And yet it was." Charles leaned forward. "Camilla, you've been a rock for this family. But you cannot keep treating my grandchildren like pawns." "They're not just your grandchildren, Charles," she snapped. "They're the future of this monarchy. They need to understand hierarchy." "And they will," Charles said, "but not at the expense of their confidence. You humiliated George. And Catherine. And, frankly, me." Camilla's face paled. "You're taking her side?" Charles's voice was quiet. "There are no sides, Camilla. There's only right and wrong. And what you did was wrong." Silence. Heavy. Camilla looked down at her hands. She'd spent a lifetime fighting for her place. And now, in one night, she'd nearly lost it all. Charles softened his voice. "I'm not asking you to step down, but I am asking you to respect the boundaries. William and Catherine are their parents." Camilla nodded, throat tight. "I understand." Charles studied her, then nodded. "Good." Camilla stood, legs unsteady. She turned toward the door, then paused, hand on the doorknob. "Charles," her voice was barely a whisper, "what if I'm not enough for this family? Not the way she is." Charles's expression softened. "You are more than enough, Camilla, but you don't have to be her to prove it." Camilla didn't turn around. She just nodded, then slipped out, the door clicking shut behind her. The king sat back, rubbing his temples. He felt older than he had in years. That evening, William and Catherine hosted a private dinner at Kensington Palace. "So," William said, cutting into his steak, "how are we feeling about this situation?" George looked up. "Do you mean Camilla?" William and Catherine exchanged a glance. Catherine reached for her wine. "We mean the new rules. Starting tomorrow, any decisions about your appearances go through us. Only us." George's eyes widened. "Really? Really," she confirmed. "And we've made it clear that if anyone tries to go around us, there will be consequences." Charlotte grinned. "So Camilla's in trouble?" Catherine's smile was small. "Let's just say she's been reminded of her place." George felt relief. But then his mother's expression sobered. "This isn't over. There will be other tests." George nodded. But for the first time, he understood. He wasn't alone. He had his family, and that was enough. A week later, George received an invitation, hand-delivered, thick envelope, wax seal stamped with the royal crest. He opened it in his room, heart pounding. His Majesty King Charles III requests the presence of His Royal Highness, Prince George of Wales, at a private audience in the throne room at Buckingham Palace. George's hands shook. A private audience with the king? Unprecedented. "When is it?" "The day after tomorrow, Your Highness." "At 3 o'clock. George nodded, mind racing. The day arrived. George wore his full ceremonial uniform, the same one from the banquet. His mother had insisted. "Make a statement." The walk to the throne room felt like a mile. The palace was quiet, halls empty. George heard his own footsteps echoing. His heart pounded. The throne room doors were closed. 2 footmen stood at attention. George took a deep breath, nodded. They swung the doors open, and he stepped inside. The room was vast, ceiling disappearing into shadows. At the far end, on the throne, was his grandfather. The king wore his own ceremonial robes, crown jewels glinting. But his expression was different. Softer. George walked forward, steps measured, head high. He stopped a few feet from the throne and bowed deeply. "Your Majesty." Charles studied him, expression unreadable. Then he gestured to the chair beside the throne. Smaller, less ornate, but still regal. "Sit, George." George hesitated, then obeyed. The chair was hard, wood smooth beneath his fingers. He sat up straight, hands on his knees. Charles leaned forward. "You've had quite the month, haven't you?" George just nodded. The king sighed. There are complicated dynamics in this family. George swallowed. I think I understand more than you think, Your Majesty. Charles raised an eyebrow. Do you now? George nodded. I understand that some people don't like sharing the spotlight. Charles's smile was small but genuine. And what do you think of that? George thought. Then he shook his head. I think it's something to be earned. Charles's smile widened. That's a very wise answer. Silence settled. George shifted, then gathered courage. Your Majesty, why did you call me here? Charles studied him. Then he reached into his robe pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He set it on the throne arm between them. Open it. George did. Inside was a medal. The Royal Victorian Order. George's breath caught. Your Majesty, I don't understand. Charles's voice was quiet. You stood your ground, George. You did what was right, even when it was hard. And you did it with dignity. That's the mark of a true prince. He paused. And one day, God willing, a true king. George's throat tightened. He looked down at the medal, then back up. The old man's eyes were kind. Proud. This is too much, Your Majesty. Charles shook his head. No, boy. It's exactly enough. George swallowed hard. Then he reached out, took the medal, fingers trembling. He fastened it to his uniform. Thank you, Your Majesty. Charles nodded. Now, there's one more thing. George looked up, heart pounding. Camilla has stepped back from certain duties. She'll still be queen consort, but she won't be making decisions about you or your siblings anymore. Not without going through your parents first. George's eyes widened. Really? Charles's smile was small. Really? George let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for weeks. Then he stood, posture straight, head high. Your Majesty, that means more to me than the medal. Charles stood too, posture regal. I know it does, boy. He paused. Your mother, she's a force to be reckoned with. George grinned. Yes, sir. Charles chuckled. And you, George? What kind of force are you going to be? George thought. Then he met his grandfather's gaze, voice steady. The kind that earns his place. Charles's smile widened. Then you'll do just fine. The audience was over. George bowed again, turned, and walked out of the throne room, head held high. The footmen swung the doors open. He stepped into the hallway, heart light. As he walked back through the palace, he passed a window. His reflection stared back. A boy in uniform, a medal glinting at his chest, posture straight, expression sure. He barely recognized himself. That evening, as George lay in bed, he thought about the banquet. The empty chair. The way his mother had walked into that room like a queen. The medal on his nightstand. He thought about the future. The crown. The responsibility that came with it. And for the first time, he didn't feel afraid. Because he knew now that he wasn't alone. He had his family. His real family. The ones who chose him. The ones who fought for him. And that was all the power he needed.